rock and roll will take you in. Poor kids, rich kids, old kids, got kids. Rock and roll will take you in. And rock and roll will take you in. Treat you like a long lost friend. Rock and roll will take you in if your heart is true. Lost cause, schemers at any cost. Rock and roll will take you in. Lost souls all alone, runaways far from home. Rock and roll will take you in. Hood and crazy, give it up, all hazy. Can't see tomorrow from today. Tired, frustrated, what I do just for a break. Why can't someone point me in the way? Oh, rock and roll will take you in. Treat you like a long lost friend. Rock and roll will take you in if your heart is true.
I think there are a number of reasons that it's been such a vital and vibrant musical place here in this area. And part of it is that there's a tradition of it. There have always been good musicians, and so they teach other musicians, and the bar is high. And so it's been very, I think there's just a tradition of high quality and good music, which is great. So, to a certain extent, it's self-sustaining in that way. I think it's also, of course, because of the university and the number of people who are moving through. And also because we have a complete community here. For one reason or another, we've always had enough support for musicians in terms of places to play, radio stations that'll play their music, great music stores, great teachers, recording studios, record labels, managers, agents. There's always been enough support structure to keep everything going.
Partly the fact that there are many, many colleges in the state of Illinois.
That's right.
And I mean, that was the best place to play on a college campus, and there were just a lot of them.
So you could hub, you could be a band and hub out of here.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
The universities seem to have more money. There'd be concerts at Illini rooms, A, B, and C. That would duplicate itself all over. All of us bands played at Northern Illinois, Western Illinois, Eastern Illinois, Southern Illinois. Carbondale was a huge place.
Yeah.
I don't know if I hit Eastern or not. And then the private schools, So the colleges had a lot of things. So there was just this live music thing. There was just this, vibe out there to see live music, and it just was infectious in the town. It was infectious in the clubs. A lot of clubs with lots of music.
I always thought it was probably to do with the university being here. I never quite understood it either. But because there are so many young people here, and there's a need for bands to be here and play, and there's not a lot of places in the Midwest that happens in. There are a couple of major cities like Chicago or St. Louis or something, but I think it's because it's a college town, and it's a thriving college town, and there's a lot of people here and to feed into that. So if you're a musician or a creative artist, you can actually make something happen here instead of having to be in say New York or LA.
It's actually, a lot of it is unexplainable as to why Champaign was such a spot for everybody to gravitate. It just kind of was what we used the term happening back then. But Champaign was a happening, and it was where everybody went to have a great time.
In the 60s and 70s in particular, that was so much of culture and society revolved around music, and so much of people's social life revolved around going to shows and seeing bands, and that was kind of where it was happening.
I don't know. I just think that there was kind of an early bohemian culture around here too that led to being creative, and music was one of the outlets.
You had that connection to Chicago, which is only 2.5 hours, and then Indianapolis wasn't far, and so it was a good central location and a good college town, and for some reason it just started happening.
Champaign was almost centrally located in some of the best bar band circuits at the time. It was just a lot of opportunity to work. And so all these great musicians are coming to Champaign going, I want to work. I want to, if you were a developing band, getting into the bar band circuit was like taking the next step just below touring. And so there was a lot of bands there, a lot of talent, like every college, but it seemed like Champaign had a lot of opportunity. Again, it's centrally located from St. Louis to Chicago to oh my gosh, Milwaukee, Indianapolis. There was just so many different areas where you could actually drive to it and work. So I think all that just really developed into, that's where it's happening. Well, so-and-so came out of this. Well, so-and-so came out of Champaign. Well, so all of a sudden it became a magnet. It was either Champaign or Chicago, and even then Chicago started sort of drifting towards Champaign.
For whatever reason, the magic is here. I mean, I think all of those things contributed. And I think as it began, as it got the initial start, I think it grew and grew, just under its own power. I mean, it just kind of developed because there was so many influential people here.
Well, number one, college towns are great. If there wasn't a university in this town, a lot of things probably wouldn't have happened. There were a lot of bands that met each other, like R.A.Z. Those guys were all college buddies.
It's a university town, so there's a lot of interest in music in general, the arts in general, and then that coupled with what was going on culturally.
Champaign-Urbana back in those days was like a hotbed of rock and roll, and people don't realize that. People think of, Greenwich Village and, Santa Monica, California, Berkeley, but in the Midwest, it was Champaign when they're,
Right.
Irving was here.
This was Berkeley East.
Yeah.
It really was. The whole hippie movement going on, everything. It was just like scenes you've seen from the Haight-Ashbury and the Summer of Love and all that. That identical thing was going on here, right when the band started.
Yeah, it was big. Yeah, and we were definitely in the right place at the right time.
One of probably the biggest thing, the biggest reason Champaign was such a hot spot was because of Blythe Unlimited, and it was, along with Premier Talent in Chicago, the leading Midwest booking agency, and it booked just every kind of job, and you can imagine, from clubs to parties to concerts to everything, and they had some really good booking agents.
A lot of the reason for their success is they had agents in there that worked and worked hard. They were on the phone all the time.
When we came down here, Blythe Unlimited was established. Now, Blythe Unlimited in 1966 was basically Bob Nutt and friends. Bob Nutt then went in partnership with this little 17-year-old kid out of Danville, Illinois, named Irving Azoff. We first played for Irving when he booked us in the Navy Club in Danville, Illinois in about 1966. Then Irving was in high school at that time. Irving then graduated high school, came to Champaign as a chemistry major, and then immediately brought his brains, skills, and talents to Blytham. He became partners with Bob Nutt.
Yeah, I mean, he took the ball and he went with it. I mean, he took REO and yeah, he's a powerhouse, you know. And what's he do now? I mean, he's done the Eagles and I don't know who all, but he's, you know, he's big time. He was really a go-getter, you know. And people get inspired by that sort of thing when somebody from an area, you know, is successful. Then, you know, some of that rubs off on them, you know, and they have a little extra bit of competition or go, you know, instilled in them.
Irving, of course, went on to take over the world, and but his global dominance started right here in Champaign.
I don't think they cared. They were drunk most of the time, and what we found is that in most of the clubs, what they really wanted was danceable music. They didn't care whether you played your own, you know, and they sometimes even turned their nose up at your own music because it wasn't recognizable. They were drunk and they wanted, you know, Louie Louie was what they wanted.
There were certain fans that wanted to go to certain clubs and listen to copy tunes and get drunk and just listen to that kind of music.
Locally here, the club scene paid the bills so that creative people could go back home, write good music, and record it. I don't think the people here were that interested in listening to the recorded music until REO hit big.
You could get away without playing covers because the students down here were, everyone was there, you know, everyone's minds were opening, and you know the influence of the California music scene and
exactly right.
was heavy, and the British invasion, and so it got to the point where if you didn't have original material, that separated you. You were in a kind of a lower echelon. There were some good cover bands down here, but unless you could play a full set of originals, you were kind of like, it's kind of cheesy. And once you could fill a whole set with all original songs that people reacted to, then you know that was kind of the rite of passage. And REO was one of the first bands that was able to pull that off.
Right.
Really.
And you know, even the cover songs we did were different ones than everybody was doing. People were doing the beer drinking music like Hi-O Silver and Louie Louie, and we were doing things by the Doors and Hendrix that people had never even heard yet.
Right.
Because music didn't go from one end of the country to the other instantly. It would take a while for word to filter down about the West Coast bands and some of the British bands. So we were doing Light My Fire before it was a single. People thought that was our song.
Right. That was that's true.
So it was our choice of the cover songs we did do.
Right, they
were
weren't top
educational.
40.
People did,
Right.
That wasn't mainstream at all. It was what they then called underground radio.
Right.
It's almost the easier way to do it because it's so much more accessible, and you're not challenging people to have to discover something new when they're just out to have a good time. And I totally understand that. And there are some great bands in town playing great cover music and making a lot of money and putting on great shows.
But people seem to like the original material. I mean, and when we finish these songs and they all clap, I'm like, but we wrote that. You know, and you're right. I guess they really, you know, they maybe that's part of how the music got informed in terms of its quality, was that, okay, you can write your own stuff, but it better be worth listening to. So that's pretty cool.
You know, we could put a band together and we could go out and play cover music and you know, sell a lot of beer and make people dance and you know, make a lot of money. But I think the people that are like writing their own music and, you know, they're just taking it to the next level because that's what they do. You know, they're into the music so much. I'm not saying that that's not bad to go out and play, because like some people, like, I just like to play. You know, I may not be the person to write songs, but I like to go out and play. Well, that's great too. But then I think if you're really serious about it, you know, and you want to really be creative, you take it to the next level. You start writing your own music, and hopefully, you know, people will pick up on it and they like it, and that makes you feel good too.
That of bands writing their own music here, and of support for original music, and places like WEFT and WPGU playing that music. It doesn't have to be something national. It doesn't have to be a cover. It's sort of strange if you look at something like the Chicago Reader and you look at the bands that are playing. I mean, that's a huge city, but so many of the bands seem to be, you know, a tribute to this, a tribute to that, the copy bands, you know, I really think that the scene here is fantastic and lively in its way, and it's just nice to see so many people doing their own thing and just writing their own music, going their own way.
You know, from my perspective, it is everything about live performing. I mean, the acceptance and appreciation and support of original music and of live original music specifically. You know, kind of the minority of the minority. I mean, getting people to come out to shows takes a lot of effort, but it also takes good songs and a good show. And if you get all those things, then you can see why it's so appealing.
Co-ed theater, and there was co-ed 1, co-ed 2 right here, and now they've got some gigantic building.
I remember I saw in that co-ed theater, I saw the movie 2001, and when Hal says, I was born at the University of Illinois in Champaign, of course the place erupted in applause, but they would have said that because we're just now coming to the engineering campus, and many of the early developments in computing and transistors were invented or researched at University of
You
Illinois.
probably would have discovered some of those things had you not dropped out of college in your last semester to
it was either join a rock band or invent the personal computer.
Right.
And I thought, you know,
what's anyone going to need a personal computer for?
Right.
What in the world?
I said, that'll never catch on.
Right. That'll never catch on. I'm going to play piano in a rock band.
That's right.
You were always a visionary, Neil. You know
well, thank you. There's a student union. We once played Golden Country on the steps of the student union.
Yeah, but we were FedEx office.
And this is all engineering campus.
That's it over there?
That's it, right?
Wow.
Yeah, but all these buildings. Everything in this whole 2 blocks is the engineering campus. Metallurgy. Gosh.
Yeah.
Here comes the Double E building, where I first realized that it was going to be really hard. Like the mathematics were just crazy.
Well, especially when you were stoned on marijuana every day in class.
That
it's kind of hard to do.
Get home from a show at 4 in the morning, try to do some calculus from Mars at bright and early at 8. Yeah, didn't work.
That was multitasking that was even beyond your intellectual abilities, Neil. That's. But hey, you tried. You know what I'm saying?
I did give it a try. I lasted for quite a few years. Right over my shoulder here are the Illinois Street Residence Hall complex, which is actually where the band started. I met Alan Gratzer here by accident. We became college roommates, and in those buildings right behind me, we literally had our first rehearsals. We talked him into letting us rehearse in the basement of this dormitory complex. I think until they finally realized how loud of a band we were, and then we had to find a different place, which eventually was the Red Lion, where the owner, Tyke Kalopoulos, would let us rehearse day after day. And just one block that way is the engineering campus, and where I actually learned the name of the band. The R.A.Z. Speedwagon was an old truck. It was a milestone in transportation because it could go fast and carry a heavy load at the same time. So it was considered part of a course I was taking called the History of Transportation. And the day we were looking for a band, when we were rehearsing in the building behind me, we had no name for the band. We finally got offered $40 to play at a fraternity house, so we thought we should have a name. And the next day I walked into my History of Transportation class, and written on the board were the words R.A.Z. Speedwagon. And I told the other guys, and they go, hey, that sounds great. You know, it's the 60s, it's got the word speed in it, you know. So that's it. Like, within these few blocks, and then right back over at the Red Lion, that's where it all happened.
I mean, REO was like kind of the cutting edge. We were the kind of the, you know, not to blow our own horn, but we were probably the biggest of the Champaign bands. But
we were the first band to get a recording contract and all that.
That's right.
We were still living here. We had a record out.
Right.
I'm driving down the street in my Datsun 240Z like a rich rock star. That's the guy in REO. They got a record out.
Yeah.
You know,
and we thought we were huge. I mean, we were like, talk about being big fish in a small pond. We were. That was us.
Yeah, where was that?
Right there.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Was that
a small building?
Blytham? Yeah.
There you go.
One thing they changed, you can't go in that door anymore. It's the men's restroom. Remember how the bouncer, you know,
That's right. That's where that was the front door, right?
Yeah, I tried to get in the other day.
Where's the other bus?
That's the men's restroom.
I'm going to turn when you just saw me.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is where we did all of our. We loaded in. Oh, Chase.
How you guys doing? What is that?
Yes, it was much bigger.
Yeah.
The stage was right here.
It used to come out. It was bigger. It didn't come out of the corner.
It was over there.
It came straight
Right off
out
of
here.
Right. It came all the way up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah,
It was big.
and it was lower, not too high off the ground, but it went most of that wall.
Right.
But right here, most of the songs on the first album were written right here because Tyke would let us rehearse here. I mean, and second album too. Yeah, this was our rehearsal hall.
Here's Dave.
Everything is, they haven't done anything to the structure. They just, there's a little more bar area and a little less dance floor. But the dance floor was where people used to sit and watch. They didn't dance. It was like a concert. Yeah. Maybe the burgers come in the meal.
Oh yeah, that's good, man.
I love that.
Hi, how are you?
I think at the time they did it, they said it was for a certain length of time.
Now, what was Memphis on Main?
If you'll notice, that is the back cover of our second album. And the reason it's up here on display is because this is where that picture was taken. This very bar. Where the cover was shot. Still here.
Seem like it doesn't
Still
seem
here.
like
1898.
Yes, we used to fly to shows like in Virginia and come home to the Red Lion in time for the last call.
fly back to Champaign, land at that little grass airstrip, and get back to the Red Lion for last call.
Yeah, and people would be going, "Where'd you play tonight?" You know, Roanoke. How did you get back here so fast? We had our own little plane, our own pilot.
That was a great Durkin.
Yeah, John Durkin, the Flying Turkey, who is still alive and well, retired, thank goodness.
We met a little pilot here in Champaign back in about '72, and we used to pack 7 of us into a 4-seater Cessna single-engine airplane, took off from a grass runway just a little bit outside of town. And what we would do is we would try to get to the gig and finish up in time to make it back for last call at the Red Lion, baby. One more to
When we're introed, it's always, you know, ladies and gentlemen from Champaign, Illinois. Our Champaign roots are very important to us. We're proud of it, and you know, there were a lot of Midwest bands, and you know, there were the Detroit bands, you know, Seeger and Nugent. There was Rockford, Cheap Trick. There was the Chicago band, Styx and the Ides of March and the Buckinghams, and then there were the downstate bands, the Champaign bands, the REO and Head East and Star Castle.
Right, and the band called Champaign.
Yeah,
that actually
Champaign,
had a #1 single.
Danny Fogelberg came out of here, so there was a.
Yeah. When we say we're from Champaign, our younger members of our audience don't understand what a nexus for bar band music this town was.
Yeah.
I mean, this was where everybody could get work. People came here that weren't going to school here. They just heard about the town.
I never went to school here. I just came down here to rock.
From Chicago. We were looking for a singer. But a lot of the people here weren't here to go to school. They were here because they heard if you get a band going in Champaign, you might actually get work.
Yeah.
So
and get paid.
Yeah. Yes.
Dropped it.
Yeah.
That's what what a concept.
Yeah.
What a concept. Do that.
No matter where we went after we left Champaign, all over the country, all over the world, we always kind of felt like we were the goodwill ambassadors for Champaign, Illinois. We've always, you know, talked about how big a part Champaign and the people of Champaign played in
Every single night.
Yeah, every night. And so even to this day, no matter where we go, we bring Champaign with us. So when they contacted us about dedicating a street to the name of the band, that was a very cool thing. And you know, you can take those things lightly and be glib about it, but for us to have a street named after us in Champaign, Illinois, and get the key to the city from the mayor, that it really did. It was an emotional experience, and every time we come here, it's like it makes you feel good. Who wouldn't want to have a street named after them, you know?
Hi, guys. Hello. Time for the show.
Well, what brought me to Champaign was I was going to college. Left my music career back in the high school, broke up my band and said, okay, music's over now, I'll just do it as a hobby. And I was going to be an aeronautical and astronomical engineer. So my freshman year, I really actually went to school. I worked hard and got halfway decent grades. And then all of a sudden I discovered this band that I told them all they needed was me and we could make it, which was funny because I wasn't that necessarily that egotistical, but I knew it. I saw them. I said, "Oh my gosh, this band is amazing. They need a high lead singer," and I told them so. And so I guess the summer between my freshman and sophomore year, Head East actually developed, and almost flunked out of school my sophomore year because we were so busy. I quit the band twice before the end of each semester to try to save my school. And finally, the second time, I said, "Guys, I got to do this. I got to quit because I promised my parents I'd get a degree, and I can't be in the band." So it went on for about 3 years. The band went through, I guess, about 25 different people. And the day I took my last final exam, I went back and we sort of started over again. Head East started over again. We got 4 out of the original 5, and then Mike Somerville came in and completed that package. And we started from there. It was fun. It was a fun time. We recorded our own record on our own label, and it picked up, and it was a dream come true from then on. Went on for about 2-3 years of just getting our songs developed live. I think that's why Flat as a Pancake was such a hit, because it was absolute developed songs through playing 6 hours a night, 7 days a week. They were very developed, and I think it was a sure thing almost. Head East developed from one of our road crew. He knew about head shops in I guess the West Coast, and they were called Head East. One night he was outside spending all night doing whatever he was doing. And then the morning came and said, I got the name, because at this time we were actually calling ourselves something different, and which I will not say because it was pretty trite. It was back when sock hops were in, and we had a sock hop name. And so our first manager, and I'll use that word loosely, says, the first thing you need to do is change your name. It's got to be, if nothing else, just 2 syllables, something catchy. Answering, okay, and we were scratching our heads trying to figure out something, and nobody was coming up with anything. And so that morning he comes in and says, I got the name, Head East. And we looked at each other and goes, huh, okay, that sounds like a cool name. And so it became Head East. And then Flat as a Pancake was actually years before the album came out. We had just come back from Colorado. The first 2 weeks we'd gotten back together. We went to Colorado to sort of reestablish the band. That's when Michael first joined, and we had to basically rebuild the band. So we went out to Colorado and played at this bar that in the middle of nowhere called Joe's Bar and Grill. And spent, like I said, 2.5 weeks out in Colorado. Yeah, and mountains are beautiful, but after a while, you get tired of climbing them. So we came back, and I guess probably about a month into coming back, maybe a little less than that, we were heading from Champaign to Bloomington to play at the Red Lion. And we were all in the car together, and I think Steve, the drummer, looks out and says, man, look at that. Look how flat this is. That flat as a pancake. I'm telling you, look how flat it is. And Roger goes, that should be the name of our first album. And we all looked at, yeah, that's cool. I thought he was kidding, I'm going, yeah, right. Because the idea of an album hadn't even crossed my mind yet. And sure enough, as the album was developing, we all knew that it was going to be called Flat as a Pancake.
At the time I came to Champaign, I had already done a few notable things. I had already toured the world with Frank Zappa and with David Bowie, and I'm going to say, yes, Talking Heads, and even King Crimson. So the first 4 major things that linked my career and really kick-started me were already in gear. I moved here because I was working with some musicians and some friends, and they were on my first solo album, and they wanted to move here. I don't know why, but I said, well, if you guys are moving, I'm moving too. And also because I had been here many times playing here, primarily at a club that was here called Mabel's. And I always liked it here. I always thought, well, Champaign-Urbana has a real youthful vibe to it. It's about education. It's about, energy and things. And there was a good music scene all the time. So when my friends decided, let's move en masse, I joined in. Got a house over in Urbana by Carl Park, and I loved it there. It was really beautiful, cobblestone streets. And my house was right across from the park itself. And every Sunday, for the 5 years that I lived here, we had a running volleyball game. Anyone could come anyone was allowed to join in. They had a really nicely done volleyball section there with wood chips and things. So all Sunday long, every Sunday, we'd have tons of people come by and play. I've always preferred more places where you can just be yourself. I mean, I'm not a big city person. I get plenty of that in all my travels around the world. And I like big cities to be in for a little while and work in, but I've always liked a more private thing where you can grow a garden and you can have a dog and those kinds of things have been an important way to ground myself, And so I've always liked this city, and I live in Mount Juliet, Tennessee, which is outside of Nashville, which is a similar type of thing, But Nashville has grown up a lot in the 18 years I've been there, but I don't think they're unsimilar. You have Vanderbilt University there and Belmont College, and it's, another one of those thriving, youthful kind of scenes. One of the people who moved here along with me was my recording engineer. His name is Rich Denhart, and he had gotten in collusion with some people here who owned a studio called Creative Audio. And they said, well, you can have time there and you don't have to rush. It's not going to be an expensive thing. So it was very important to me to have that at that point. I was making my third solo record when I first arrived here. And it turned out that I wanted to make a record that was kind of orchestral, off the wall, mostly orchestral, but done with guitars. It wasn't the normal thing. It wasn't songs, and it wasn't pop music, and it wasn't even King Crimson-like. It was a very different brand of music. And I was really fortunate to have that kind of studio to go to, because it was a comfortable thing, a low pressure zone, I would ride my bike over to it every day, and me and Rich would just work, and we'd get things done, and then, it was fun. It was like building something, and you weren't worrying about all the other things that sometimes get in the way of creativity, the record labels, desires, or the money involved, or whatever. This was just something we thought, well, we're just going to do this and get it done as long as we, because I was already out doing other things that were earning me a living, so I was well, able to do that. For me personally, it was a nice place to be, because I could be myself here and create and not spend a fortune doing it and feel comfortable doing it. So it was a good time in my life. I remember being fairly inspired while I was here. Did a lot of work. I started a band called the Bears while I was here. 3 of my friends from Cincinnati, and we always rehearsed and recorded in my rehearsal place here. And then of course I had King Crimson. So there was this influx of players and people that I knew, and we'd always end up at somewhere having drinks, the Esquire Lounge or Mabel's or somewhere, and just a lot of those kind of fun moments. They're not necessarily fun if you weren't there. I remember one night we went to Mabel's, and Robert Fripp was there with us, and he's notoriously doesn't want anyone to speak to him or anything, so he had on a badge that said, "I am not Robert Fripp." And people kept coming up to me and saying, is that guy him? Yeah, but just don't talk to him. Just leave him alone. Well, we had a lot of fun times like crazy, I mean, we would play all day and then go out and have some drinks and just go wild. It was fun. We were young, You do have one really good asset, and that is the university. I mean, with the university, you get all these wonderful new college kids every year, so there's bound to be a need for music and entertainment, and you've got some great facility here that the university has, like the Crown Arts Center is fabulous, So I think that's another part of it. Having a city that's built around education is part of it.
I've had recording studios in Champaign-Urbana since 1980. We started out in Urbana with a place called Faithful Sound, and opened Pogo Studio in downtown Champaign in 1985. I've been making records here ever since. I'm also a musician. I have played in rock and roll bands in Champaign-Urbana and other kinds of bands, country and everything else. Since 1970, I've recorded so many records and had so many bands come through. You know, I got to work with Alison Krauss when she was young here, which was a great thrill. And a great early 80s Champaign-Urbana rock band called the Vertebrats, who were just fantastic and really should have been famous just on the basis of how great their show was and how excellent their songwriting was. A band called The Last Straw, who was sort of a bluegrass-ish band. Later, I got to work with this band Hum, who were quite successful and a great rock and roll band. But I've really gotten to work with just everything: Brazilian bands, rock bands of every description, death metal bands, everyone.
Well, I came over here in 1956 to go to school, and eventually got into a home studio. I'd been a musician in Springfield, where I came from, and got connected with the Musicians Union over here and got involved playing in bands, mainly large bands, dance bands for weekends. Managed to get with a group called the Galaxies, which is kind of a teeny bopper group. We played a lot of teen clubs around here in the mid '60s, and at that time we got a contract to record in Nashville for a small label, of which we cut some sides there, and I'd put together enough equipment just to cut some demos. So after that, I thought, well, man, maybe I ought to try some songwriting. So I kind of put together a little studio in my house in the basement. I had a tri-level in East Urbana, and made the basement into kind of a studio. Did some song demos, and I'd get a call. Well, you got a little studio there. You could do some radio commercials. Okay, I can do that. And so we started doing radio commercials. And you got musicians. Why don't you do some jingles? Okay. So it was kind of a circuitous path of least resistance. Things just kind of happened, and so I ended up not doing any writing myself, but I got busy with bands. It's a place nobody had home studios at that time like they do now. It was more involved and a little more expensive style of equipment. So I started doing some bands, doing demos for bands. I'd go out and do school concerts, church choirs, virtually anything that had to do with recording. And finally outgrew, probably, I would say, and I'm not sure exactly, 67 or 68, kind of outgrew the home and went to put in a studio at R.A.Z. in Washington, and we called that Rofran Enterprises, and we had a small label, groups coming in doing demos, all kinds of music, and acetate cutter, so then you're still using records at that time, so we were cutting acetates for demos for people, and then getting to do cassette duplication. We started doing some studio things for One-Eyed Jacks and the and Finchley Boys, Seeds of Doubt, some of these groups back in the late '60s. And there were just a plethora of groups coming through that time and going into the '70s. Blytham, a local booker, they needed demo tapes to sell their bands, and so I did a lot for the groups there.
Well, there have been great studios around for a long time. And there are a number of places. There's this place in Pekin, Illinois called Golden Voice Studio, where a lot of the early REO stuff was done, and the first Starcast record was done there, and so forth. And so there's a tradition of the culture of recording studios here. And it's nice to see that tradition continue, because it's kind of an endangered culture a little bit because of home recording and people recording themselves. It's also very good for me, and I think for the music scene in general, that there's enough activity to sustain a number of studios here. And I think that's important culture also, that's worthy of preserving, a place that's dedicated to creating recordings at the highest level. Delta Kings are great. I mean, they really are as good as any, as many national acts, I think. Solid songwriting, true rhythm section, which I appreciate. It's not just a bunch of players, but it's a rhythm section that really plays well together and supports the band. You've got Matt Stewart, who's a brilliant player, and they're, they have their own sound and style. They're great.
I was born and raised in New York City, and then I traveled for many years after high school. I lived in Vermont, I lived in Boston, I lived in London, lived in LA. Ended up back in New York one last time, about 83 or 84, and then left in 90 and moved here. And of course, all that time I was playing in rock and roll bands and chasing the big record deal. I spent a year between in this band called The Dictators. They had just put out a record on Epic, and they had a second album coming out a year and a half, which was a half a year after I left, on Asylum. Their managers managed Sandy and Murray also managed Blue Oyster Cult, and that was right at the minute when Blue Oyster Cult had Don't Fear the Reaper. So it got paid for. It paid for my lifestyle during that time, as back in the golden era of rock and roll, when managers would give you $200 and a row crew and all this, and you walk around like you're a faux rock star. After punk rock, it was sort of neo-post-punk glam, and that's when I had a band with Lee Crystal and Gary Ryan, who were from Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, and Michael Monroe, who was the lead singer in Hanoi Rocks. And we were called Secret Chiefs. In fact, that picture over there is from when we toured Europe, and some guy did that in a dressing room in Helsinki with Polaroids. And we came back. That's about 80. I just got married, so it was about 87, 88. After that, I had one last band called 8.5 in New York. And about 1990, the poverty became crushing, and decided to open a record store in Champaign, Illinois. And here I am. And when I came to Champaign in 1990, I said, never again will I be in a band. I've paid my dues. I'm tired of the poverty. I'm tired of the lugging gear, and I'm all done. And, I started selling equipment and said, I'm done with this. And my wife said, after about a year and a half, said, if you don't get in a band, I'm going to kill you. Just by fortune would have it, the guy who was the bass player in the Delta Kings, there was another guy, and at the time they were called the Hot Chilies. And they came into my record store where I had one guitar left, and it was behind the counter, and they said, you play guitar? I said, yeah. I said, well, come to this garage on Wednesday. So I went to this garage. They were kind of country and blues, and all covers, of course. And I went and played. It was fun to play, and they were good musicians. And they said, okay, be at this club on Friday at 8 o'clock. And I thought, okay, but, I'll come watch you guys. They said, no, you're going to play with us. And I said, I don't know your material. I've spent an hour and a half with it. You'll do fine. The Delta Kings were born. We dropped the Hot Chilies in particular because the Chili Peppers started doing well, and there were times we'd show up at clubs and people thought we were a Chili Peppers or an alt-rock cover band. And plus the Delta Kings came with a logo and a whole bunch of stuff. So joined the Delta Kings, and that was 17, 18 years ago. We've done over 1,700 gigs. When Kenny, the other guitar player, retired about 3 years ago, after a series of transitional moments, we got Matt Stewart in the band. Matt has been great, and it was a fortuitous coming together, because that's when I kind of, songwriting-wise, said, I want to be more rock and roll, and with some compositional melodic elements that were not there in a blues rock kind of thing, and also with the ability to have more of a lyrical thrust. And Matt being in the band has been great. He sings harmony, which is great. He's a very inventive guitar player. I mean, he's just not typical, and that is a real turn on, because he's really his own style. But if I had to bag it, sometimes I feel like I got Richard Thompson in the band. And if you saw on the floor, there's one of my 3 Richard Thompson box sets, and I don't know how I ended up with 3 of them, but he's made 3. So it's been great. He's been great with arranging. Terry and Bill are these meat and potatoes, basic, hardcore rhythm section that are just so straightforward and metronomically hip and creative, without stepping on stuff. So that's the sort of brief history of the Delta Kings. Somewhere in that time, we've made 5 CDs, and we're working on our first electronic release. So that's the story of the Delta Kings, or me in Champaign.
I came to school here in 1967, and in 1969 I had a couple of roommates who wanted to start a record ordering service, and at the time I was working at WPGU, and I thought, well, that's a great idea, and so basically we had $1.25, and we bought a notebook, a pencil, and a Schwann catalog, and had a phone number for a distributor out of Chicago, and we would just sit at a desk, and somebody would come in and say, I want to order this. We'd order it, and 2 days later they'd have it, and that's how we started record service. And I was a full-time student at the time, and we started this business, and we had 8 people, and we all worked for $25 a week, which when we finally counted it down, we realized some of us were working for like $1 an hour. So eventually we changed that so that we were all working for, let's see, what was it originally, $1.50 an hour? Anyway, we always worked for minimum wage or less, but record service was an idea that took off. It was totally word of mouth. We were $1 cheaper than anybody else in town. We could buy stuff for $2.65 and sell it for $2.95 or $3. And it was fun. People came in, we talked about music, and it really grew. And eventually we ended up with a full-time store. And with that store, we would have a lot of musicians who worked for us. We also got to know all the musicians. I found that I was spending my life either at my store or at bars listening to bands, and got to know a lot of musicians. And it was a real social atmosphere. I mean, we were all part of a counterculture. We weren't necessarily all long hair. We didn't necessarily all play the same music, but it was a definite cultural event for the community and for college students as well as the people who just lived here. It was really a phenomenon. I think, let's see, in 1967 when I came here, the One-Eyed Jacks actually had a single that they had put out, which was pretty adventurous for back then. But I didn't know any place where I could actually buy it. I mean, I don't think I didn't see a copy of it for many, many years, and I think there was a shortage of outlets for people who had local music. And when we had our store, we highly encouraged every local band to put out product, and we would be glad to sell it for them at a very, I think we took about 10%. So if they sold it for $3, we made 30 cents. Some of the early groups that had success, and they were not putting out their own local product, but they got signed early, were Dan Fogelberg and REO Speedwagon. And I think that paved the way, at least inside their minds, emotionally and spiritually, for a lot of groups to think, well, if those guys can do it, so can we. So everybody was going after the prize back then, the prize being a national recording contract. And some groups, because of that, didn't want to put out local product. They thought, well, if we put out something local, we'll never get the big deal. And what we found was it was good for a local band, and this was happening in a lot of major, I should say secondary and tertiary markets, like probably Champaign-Urbana is really a tertiary market, third level. But groups from those areas, college towns especially, could put out local product, sell thousands of copies, and get heard and be seen, making some noise on the charts certain places. The best example I could think of off the top of my head is Head East, who printed up their own album, Flat as a Pancake,
instead of doing demo tapes, why stop there? Let's just do demo. We called it a demo album, all right? And what we're going to do, we're going to send out albums instead of tapes like everybody else did. But meanwhile, we're going to sell them at all our shows because, like I said, we were a very busy band. And hopefully try to get our money back for the process in itself. And by the time, if someone picked it up, we would already be in the black. And it was just one of those financial things. I mean, we were from the Midwest. We liked, paying our bills, and saw that this would be a good way to try to kill two birds with one stone.
And probably between the Champaign area and St. Louis area sold 10,000 copies of it. And because of that, they were signed to A&M Records. And so we used that as like an example. Look, you can do that too. Let's get Champaign on the map. I mean, we really encouraged all the local groups to record. And I would say, look, what's the worst that can happen is you'll have a couple hundred copies of a single to show your grandkids that you actually were in a band. You know, I said, that's great stuff.
Yeah, I came to school here from Chicago, University of Illinois, in 1965. I came down always, fascinated with the concept of rock and roll, though for 3 years I was in a folk group, Rick, Ron, and Ralph, so we learned the basics of three-part harmony. Lived in the dorms and found out that there were a lot of dorm bands. What was sort of rare at the time were most rock and roll bands were mostly instrumental. Everybody was still learning their instruments as best they could, and the vocals were somewhat secondary. We came in and brought in guitars, joined a very, very good rock band, and we ended up now with three-part harmony vocals, and named ourselves The Regiment in 1966. And we were mostly top 40, though we did write several records ourselves, which we have recordings of. But we were a sort of a Lovin' Spoonful, Mamas and Papas type vocal band. We started playing in Chances Are and the Red Lion, and immediately, literally the first semester we formed, we went on a tour with Peter and Gordon and became their backup band, playing 10 gigs in the local Illinois, Indiana area. A very good experience for us. The nice thing at the time was the groups literally got paid as much then as they're getting now. We would get $100, $150, $200 a night playing fraternities and sororities, and every weekend you would open up the Daily Illini and there'd be 6 or 7 fraternities and sororities that were having socials. We made money there. I mean, we were very, very fortunate. I mean, our second year we had to hire an accountant, and we were all full-time in college. So it was pretty exciting.
Back in the late 60s, out of high school, and I was working at a Baldwin piano company. We wanted to start a guitar shop, with amps and stuff. So we were the first guys to bring the Marshall amps to town. And then me and a fellow named Bob Philippi, he had a company called Sound Factory. And we moved Baldwin's guitar shop down to Neal Street, and that's where we built Sound Factory was there, and we had a place called McGee 3. And we built a pretty cool rehearsal hall for REO. They used to rehearse in there. We had a big open room. They'd leave their gear in there, and they'd come in at night and rehearse. We'd go home, we'd work all day, go home, or hang out with them. Me and Doug Bauer, who was running Blytham, the booking agency at that time, and a guy named Albert Moore, started Great American Music Company. And Irving and Johnny Barrick had left, gone to California, and so Doug was running Blytham, so we were, he was booking bands, and we were selling equipment, and back in those days there was, REO basically kept us going for the most part, because they would come in before they go on tour and they'd load up with 200 sets of guitar strings or 300 sets and boxes of drum equipment and drumsticks. Scratcher would come in and order, 10 dozen pair of drumsticks, and mean, it was pretty cool. It was a good time. You know, we had a shop and we built cabinets back there and sold a lot of gear and sold gear to, I mean, the Faith Band, REO, Slank Rand. We built some cabinets for Gene Simmons at Kiss. We built the travel cases. You know, we kind of did everything we could to stay alive, you know. And it was always good when REO boys showed back up because, hey, we were going to get a paycheck this week. So we did that for about 10 years, you know. We did that, and those days were good because there were a lot of bands in town. I mean, there was Star Castle, there was REO, and about that time they had gone to California, but there was Slink Rand, there was the Skater Boys, you know. Bruce Hall was playing in the Jesse Ross band, then later went into REO. There was, Appaloosa, you know, and there were a lot of places to play in those days. There was Mabel's, there was Red Lion, there was Chances Are, there was Ruby Gulch, there was Chins, there was the Brown Jug down on campus. So, you know, you could go out any night and there was a band playing. So there was a lot of business, you know. Business was good.
Yeah, the Finchley Boys, I didn't get to see them much in the heyday, but obviously George Faber, a fantastic performer, and Michael Powers, a great drummer, and somebody who, is sort of overused. People say they have their own style, but nobody drums the way that he does. He really has a distinctive way of playing. He's, I would say, a real natural musician. Garrett Osteich, brilliant guitar player. So yeah, they were just great.
Well, the Finchley Boys got started. We were the first band called the Finchley Boys was at Urbana High School. A guy named Mark Warwick was a guitar player, and he got together with a guy named Jim Cole, who was the singer at the time, and he played some rhythm guitar. And then it added several different members. Michael Powers ended up being the drummer, and Larry Tabling, I think, was maybe the second bass player that they had, but it's been a while now, and I don't even remember the first guy's name. And I actually was just hanging around the band, but I played harmonica, so they wanted to do a Rolling Stone song. It had an address of Michigan Avenue. I think it was where Chet's Records Company is. And I can't remember the exact name of the song, but it was an instrumental. The harmonica was the lead instrument, so one song a night I'd play on that, and the crowd really responded well to it. And so little by little, then I started singing some of the songs.
I went to high school with a couple friends of mine that were musicians, Al Goldberg and Larry Minton. They'd had a band in high school called the Red Hots, and then we all went to school, different schools. Al came down to the U of I here in Champaign, and I went to school at ISU. Well, that next summer, we put an ad in the paper when we got back and said the lead singer needed to play with quality musicians, and a guy named Brian Cook answered the ad. We put the band together with Brian Cook, and we came up with the name Somebody Groovy. We played around Chicago, and Al would travel up to the Chicago suburbs, and we'd play up there, and then Al would book jobs down here through Blythe Unlimited, and we would all travel down from Chicago down to Champaign, and we'd kind of go back and forth. between playing up down here in Champaign on a weekend and up there in Chicago on a weekend. Along that, near the end of the school year of '67, there was Blytham put on a big battle of the bands, and it was judged by the One-Eyed Jacks, and all the local bands played. And it turned out the winners, the two winning bands of the Battle of the Bands, were our band, Somebody Groovy, and then the band that George and Tabe were in, the Finchley Boys, was the other band, and we tied. So we went on, and so that was kind of cool. And we went back to Chicago. We had made the decision that we wanted to move down here and actually be based in Champaign. So in June of 1967, we actually moved, picked up everything, the little we had, and moved down to Champaign and started playing based out of here in that, just right then in June. So soon after that, we were approached by Bob Nutt, who wanted to talk to us about putting a plan together to expand the band. And what we did at that point, we agreed, went along with him, and we met with George and Tabe, because the Finchley Boys had broken up as Glenn, the drummer, had left the band. And so we added George Faber and Larry Tabling to the Somebody Groovy band, and we collectively moved out to a house out in northeast Urbana area called Brownfield Wood. We moved to a big house out there, and we decided to call the band Brownfield Wood.
They were completely different than the Finchley Boys. They were a harmony band, did songs by the Byrds and that kind of thing. And the guitar player, though, was really good. And he had a 12-string guitar and a 6-string, but he played them both really well.
Larry Minton switched over to keyboards. Larry Tabling stayed on bass. Brian Cook and George Faber switched off as lead singers based upon the song. Goldberg stayed on drums, and I played all the lead guitar stuff. And so we worked out a lot of really great songs and spent quite a while practicing, probably too long practicing. In retrospect, what we did is we took two real popular bands and that were playing and then combined into one group that then went and practiced for a couple months and didn't play any jobs. So it made some challenges as we had no money coming in all of a sudden. So we practiced for several months, got ready to go, played a few gigs. Winter set in, wasn't any heat out at the house out in the country. And I think so Larry and Al and Brian decided to head back to Chicago. I had decided to just stay down here because I liked the way the music scene was going on down here. George and Tabe thought they could reach out to Michael Powers and see if we could get him to join the band again. He had been their original drummer in the Finchley Boys. We got hold of Michael, started doing some practicing, and put the band together and decided to just use the name. Since there was three of them from the original Finchley Boys, we just decided to use that name and then moved on forward with that lineup.
The name Finchley Boys was taken from the back of a Kinks record cover. And back in those days with vinyl records, there was a lot to read. And I remember it was a story that Ray Davies, the founding member and the songwriter of the Kinks, said he was in a band. He and his brother actually were in a band called the Muzzies, and they got in a fight with the Finchley Boys. I don't even know why he told the story on the back of the cover, because the Finchley Boys weren't musicians, neither were the Muzzies. They were a street gang. Finchley is a part of London, I guess. I found that out later when we played. The Finchley Boys opened the show for Rod Stewart and the Spaces. And Rod, your name of the band is the Finchley Boys? He goes, I'm from Finchley, actually. And so I said, well, here's a button, and it says Finchley Boys, and he wore it when he went on.
So moving forward from then in '68, we did a few of the tunes that they had written originally, added some other songs they were playing, incorporated some new songs that we wrote, some more blues tunes, and then we continued on playing from that point with that lineup, doing some recordings and literally playing out in New York, playing some in Canada, and just playing all around the area until the end of summer of 1970, and then that's when Michael left the band. We picked up a drummer named Frank Garvey, who is still an artist and a musician still to this very day. He's out in San Francisco. He played with us for 3 or 4 months, and then we picked up a guy originally from Chicago named Billy Shaw, and he played with us through the end of 1971. And that kind of was the the Finchley Boy lineup that was more the four-man, four-piece band, kind of like as we had started in '68. Then in '72 we started doing some more recordings and added Paulie Carmen started playing with the band. He brought in Willie Dale on bass, and Ginevra Shirley started playing violin and piano with us. And we continued on till Paulie left in late '73, early '74, replaced by Bobby Carlin on drums, and that lasted till I think July of 1974, and then that was the end of any of the band that was called the Finchley Boys.
Well, all of the Chicago blues stuff was a big influence on me, and I kind of came into that through the way a lot of us white kids did. We listened to the Rolling Stones, the Animals, and the Yardbirds, and people like that. And you read on the back of the covers that they were influenced by Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and everything, Chicago blues, and you go, Chicago blues, wow, I live close to Chicago. So then you start looking into that a little bit. And I used to make little pilgrimages up to Chicago and buy a train ticket. At the time you could get a train ticket pretty cheap, and this, when I was about 17 or so, and me and several guys that were into the blues and stuff would go hang out on Maxwell Street. We weren't old enough to get in the bars, but we'd stand outside and listen to stuff, and then stay at the Y and that kind of thing. So that whole Chicago blues scene was a big influence on me. And there was just other bands. I don't know if they were that here in town that weren't necessarily an influence on me, but the fact that there were people playing gigs and making money at it, you go, well, I love music, and I maybe could do this. I think there's a little bit of Champaign-Urbana in everything I do. Just it's the prairie, Midwest, the whole atmosphere here. Just it's close enough to Chicago to have a strong blues influence, and it's also just got something. I've always sort of shied away from country music, but there is a ruralness about it, So you add that with the Chicago electric blues, and there's a lot of what my music is about.
Presbyterian church down there, downtown, had a lot of teen dances. The most notable one was St. Patrick's in Urbana, St. Pat's dances, and they had like the Tigers down there, and somehow it was there wasn't a separation of church and state. They had the Urbana High School kids used that place, and that was a cool event.
We were playing there once, and Troy Donahue showed up. He'd had a movie, the movie actor, and for some reason he was on a tour and went around and he stopped at the cinema in Urbana, and he popped in to the Tiger's Den.
On Saturday mornings they would have, that's the first time I ever saw Guy Maynard and the Seeds of Doubt and the Regiment and all those other bands. They were open for teenagers because it was a bar. But on Saturday mornings they opened it up to kids.
Panama Reds was another bar on Green Street, right by the underpass. And I saw incredible bands there from country rock bands. Appaloosa was a great band. I remember a band called Sidewinder, really good blues band. I used to see Cole Kitchen play there. Elvis Brothers later on, all kinds of bands. And I saw Sun Ra there, which is mind-boggling.
Well, one of the other alternatives to Panama Reds right down there on Green Street. Green Street used to just be the strip that was happening because it was close to campus, but all the townies would hang out there too. And so you had Panama Reds right on Green Street, and right across the street, tucked back in the alley, was the Alley Cat. And I played that club off and on for 20 years, either in a blues band or acoustically. And even the little old Alley Cat brought in people like Mighty Joe Young and Luther Allison and Sun Seals and groups that were big in Chicago, and big nationally on the blues scene, would have groups at the Alley Cat.
There was a place called Ruby Gulch on Green Street, and I would sneak in there too to see all kinds of different bands. I think the Byrds played there at one point, and just see all kinds of different groups and hippie bands.
And that was a cool place. They had jazz in there. They'd have George Benson and McCoy Tyner, a jazz piano player, and Harvey Mandel and Pure Food and Drug Act played there. He had Sugar Cane Harris on violin, and all kinds of cool jazz type, and jazz rock and fusion groups played there.
And then there was a club called Mabel's that I actually ended up being half owner with my brother Paul. And that Mabel's was for many years the live music venue. It had a big stage and a nice PA system, and it was a kind of great place for local and semi-national band. Well, I remember looking at a list of people that played Mabel's, and Bruce Springsteen was on there, and a bunch of other people that had played there trying to make it before they did make it, and it was kind of interesting.
The Mabel's scene was great, and I feel really lucky that I was able to be here and be a musician, at the height of what was the Mabel's scene. And of course, there are other scenes that built up in other, in other parts of town or in other clubs. But when you look, like the late 80s to early 90s, mid 80s to early 90s, which is when Otis and the Elevators was active, Mabel's was really big. There was a great scene going on there. Tons of national bands came through and played there. I saw Uncle Tupelo there. We opened for Jason and the Scorchers one time. Johnny Winter played there. Bo Diddley played. The list just, I'm sure, goes on and on and on.
I used to play at Mabel's in particular. That was kind of the focal point of the scene, at least in the years that I lived here. That seemed to be a club that had, a lot of international acts. I mean, certainly acts from all over the United States. And they would have every Wednesday night, I think they had a jam session, and I would go and jump into that. And there was just a lot of things. They had Halloween contest. I won it one year. And, so...
What were you?
I was all three Marx Brothers. I had someone sew a styrofoam head into this shoulder, one into this shoulder. I was Groucho in between. I had Harpo's horn over here and Chico, and I had the cigar, and I looked like three Marx Brothers. It was kind of fun.
The Red Lion Inn was great, and I used to sneak in there underage and see all these just great bands. I used to see the Rave every time I could. I loved them, and their music was great, and the show was great and hilarious. When Star Castle would play in town, it was amazing to get to see them. That was a great venue for just, people would just go there no matter who was playing. And it was a scene, it was a place where everybody just went to be. And so Red Lion Inn was a great place. And that was one of the earlier rock and roll clubs actually in the country. I think they started in 65 or 66.
I would say that the Red Lion was probably the hot spot for us. At that time, the Red Lion was the place to be. Later on, Mabel's kind of came about, but I'd say for the most part, the Red Lion was the hot spot.
The Red Lion was it. That was the pinnacle of gigs in Champaign.
There was the Chances Are too, but,
Yeah.
but after a while, Red Lion became it.
That's coming up here. Actually, before we get that.
Chances
bridge.
Are was almost a little more formal thing. Like you could play there
but it was, you know, they didn't get really rowdy and sit down and watch you like it was a concert.
Right. Yeah,
It was,
Red Lion was a concert.
Yeah, there was
a-
nobody dancing when we played.
Yeah.
You still got Cowboy Monkey, you know, downtown here, the High Dive, Micah Molly's, the Canopy Club, Memphis on Main, places like that, Bentley's. I mean, even the smaller places are starting to have a lot of live music, and then the bigger places that can bring in national acts, you know. And so, yeah, there's still people out there that want to see that, you know, and you have to realize, if you really are into that, you've got to come out and support these shows, because that's the only way the club owners can bring them in. You know, these guys can't go around and play all over the world for free. You know, it costs a lot of money to go up and down the highway. So people that like live music are, you know, have got to come out and support it. You know, so that it'll keep growing. You know, keep going.
One time, we were playing out at the park, Crystal Lake Park, and we were the opening act. And it took the sound guys forever to set up, and we started like half hour, 45 minutes late. And we get on stage, and they go, "Okay, you got 15 minutes." And I go, "No." So we played for a half hour and had everybody unhappy with us because they wanted Slink to get on there while the crowd was still big. I said, "The crowd's not going to leave. Slink Rant's coming on." And actually it turned out quite well, and that's one of the few times I actually got to see Slink play a full set, because I was there. But yeah, another local legend for sure.
Very early 70s, you know, I started a group with John Sauter and Curtis Heitman and Paulie Carmen, and that was actually the first Slink Rand group. And then we kind of merged into the Champaign area. And Curtis was the guitar player, and myself, and Paulie Carmen was wanting to just sing, but we were auditioning drummers, and we were trying to show a drummer how to play a certain thing, and Paulie sat down and started showing the guy how to play, and I said, "Whoa, Paulie, you're going to have to be the drummer, because you're smoking, man, you're cooking." So that was the way it was. Paulie was on drums and singing, and Polar Bear, which is John Sauter, was on bass, and Curtis and I played guitars. And then that group broke up after probably about a year, and I went back and played with Dennis Teakin and Ted Brooks in another Smokehouse group. And then Bernard Kelly called me to come back to Champaign. He would manage us and provide me with a PA and a truck to haul it all around in. So then we brought that, evolved into like Jeff Hall and Don Moselli, Mo, and Paul Chamberlain, and Mike Hustler. And we played a long time, you know, of course the Red Lion and all of the Red Lions for that matter, the DeKalb and Bloomington and Champaign Red Lions. And then a lot at Ted's Warehouse in Charleston, but you know, mainly around the Champaign area. So then Mo and Jeff left the group, and we got Peter Bailey, who was a very good bass player also. And then Paul left the group, and we got Chris Pyle from Indianapolis to play drums. We did a lot of playing with that group. In fact, with the manager that I'd asked to manage us from Blytham, there's this guy at Blytham, and he booked us like 326 dates in 1 year. So we weren't hurting for work. That was a bit much, but you know, I mean, that's all I wanted to do. was play. I mean, that's all we wanted to do, was play all the time. I mean, if we played like 5 nights a week, we'd come back to Champaign and we'd rehearse, 1 or 2 of those nights on the nights off. And then I taught some guitar lessons and just music, and it's all I wanted to do. That took us up to about 1979 or 80, and that was actually the last, basically the last group that I had in the Champaign area. But I mean, it was so inspiring to be here with all the other players around and all the, just everything you needed was here. You had the booking agency, you had the stores, that could repair and do anything you needed, and plus just the general music magic happening in Champaign was just something else.
Anytime you have a community of young, interested people of any kind, you're gonna, have a situation where it makes it attractive for bands to come through here and play. The target demographic for, most rock bands, rock being a very broad term, but it's really, age 16 to 25. And that's not to say that people above 25 are no longer interested. Of course, I'm 32 and still just as interested, but, a lot of people don't have the time or the inclination to fall in love with music in the way that they did when they were kids. So, college towns like this one, university communities, are kind of set up with the right scenario for a really beautiful target demographic for bands and their representatives to bring them through. Obviously, major cities never get passed over on a major tour of any kind because there's a critical mass there. But what a place like Champaign-Urbana or Bloomington, Indiana, or Iowa City offers is a really focused target demographic. So they can promote themselves to a 50,000 plus student population, and all of those kids are at the right age to where they don't have mortgages or marriages. They just have time to have fun and fall in love with art. Bloomington Normal is just as large of a population and has a large student body population as well, but they don't have anywhere near the kind of history that Champaign-Urbana does. And so then I think it comes onto the community, the people that comprise the art scene and the music scene. And we've just had the good fortune of having some really active and interested people over the years. I think that the people who own the venues, book the shows, and are dedicated to making sure that there's bands coming through, that that creates a scenario where bands want to start bands, want to play. They got a good home base. They know that they could play at a variety of different venues and in a variety of different rooms. And I think that that's why you see such a wealth of talent pretty consistently. I mean, any music scene ebbs and flows. There's years that there's more bands, better bands, in my opinion, but there's never a lack of bands. And that's because there's venues to play at. There is recording studios to go and lay, commit to tape. So, all of those things, I mean, I guess it's chicken and the egg, but they all kind of work together to create one really healthy music scene. I'm proud of what we have here, and I try to be a big-time cheerleader and flag waver for what we have, and try to get out in the world. And it's fun for me when I go to different parts of the country and travel on business to talk to people about what I do and where I am and how Champaign-Urbana has affected the world. I mean, you can always point to the web browser. I mean, in the end, I think that our community produced enough technological advances and, cultural relevance between Ebert, REO, and the internet web browser that we've stamped our place into the history of time, and I'm glad to even be a real small part of that.
Elsinore started in the fall of 2004 in Charleston. Mark, Dave, and I were all in music school together. I was studying vocal performance, and I later changed to music composition. And Mark was studying piano education and performance and composition, and Dave was studying percussion performance. I knew Chris, our bass player, just from the music scene, which is small but still good in Charleston, and told him that we needed a bass player, and it was just a very organic thing. It just sort of happened, and it made sense. And his brother played bass, and he was a guitar player, but he took on the challenge and has succeeded for sure. We started playing up here really quickly. Larry Gates, who was the founder of Lorenzo Getz, he was basically our big brother. He kind of saw that, what we were doing, and we became friends, he and I. And then he thought, let's get you guys up to Champaign and show you what's going on up here, because it's a lot bigger than Charleston, and it's a lot more functional, and it's a cool town. And so we started playing up here and instantly fell in love, and it did make sense that we move here. None of us wanted to move to Chicago or to New York or Los Angeles. I mean, Champaign was just a very easy decision because of everything that is happening here. It doesn't feel overwhelmingly large, and it just seemed like the right thing to do. And now we've been here for nearly 6 years. I think our first real club show in Champaign was with the Beauty Shop, and I think that was at the peak of their run as a band, and it really made me feel good that there were bands from Champaign doing what they were doing, which was what we wanted to be doing, and Headlights as well. Headlights were doing a lot of great touring and making good records, and we started being aware of Polyvinyl and Parasol, and hearing about the bands that have come and gone, and hearing about how the Canopy Club got started, and like the history of open mic nights around town. And I think that we just feel like it's a great music scene to strive to be at the top of. So we worked really hard to get a good fan base, and to write quality music, and to get exposed, and to make a name for ourselves as a band from Champaign-Urbana, and show that we're living here because we want to live here. We moved here to be here. We're very happy here, and that this is our home base.
I think part of it is, having a college town, especially a college town with 40,000 students. It's you really bring a lot of diversity, you bring a lot of different people into the community, and you have this dynamic where you have high school kids hanging out at college functions. I remember going to see the Vertebrats and the Nines, and some of the bands playing at street dances and this type of thing. So you have a melding of the culture where there's a little bit of an overlap, and I think that draws up, the kids coming from the local kids who are playing music and have rock and roll dreams, not to mention the kids who come here for school and wind up, kind of doing the same. I was one of the local kids and wound up playing with, people who came to town to go to school here, or people, who grew up here. So I think it's just, it's part of having that, diverse melding pot of diverse talent, and various levels of, you get a guy who's a virtuoso who happens to fall in with some punk rockers, and then all of a sudden, boom, you got something magical. Geographically, right between Chicago, St. Louis, Indianapolis, too, it's a good tour stop. You have an opportunity as a band. If you're in, Ottumwa, Iowa or something, you're probably not going to get many opportunities to open for a national act. So that was one of the things, too. And, as bands are playing here, even in the 60s and 70s, the local acts would jump onto a bill with someone coming through the area, and it's a whole different ballgame when you start playing with people who are already established. So it really opens a lot of doors. It gives you a lot of perspective, and it gives you a lot of exposure, and it kind of raises the level of how serious you are about playing. I kind of fell into it backwards. I was one of those guys who I was asked to be in bands before I really knew how to play, because I had friends who I liked to hang out, and I was kind of a rock and roll guy. I was, punk rock, new wave kid in the early 80s. So it's funny, I went to play in the Moon 7 Times, and I was asked to play, and they said, we have a record deal, they want us to go on tour. But we don't have a bass player. And I said, I'd love to, except for the fact that I don't really know how to play bass. And they're like, it's not that hard. You can we'll help you. We'll teach you the songs. And the same thing happened with a gentleman by the name of Steve Shield, who was playing under the name Steve Pride. He just wanted to record some country demos, and he said, I'd like for you to play bass. And I said, I don't really play bass. He goes, it's not that hard. I mean, we'll work you along. And then we wound up recruiting. Jay Bennett got into that band. We had some really good drummers playing that band. And, and then I wound up living with Jay for a couple of years. It just really raises the level of your abilities when you have somebody who is at that level of talent. So I was living with him when he got the call to join Wilco. He was flying out to L.A. to play sessions when I was, we're just barely scraping by paying our $300 rent, and he's flying out to L.A. to, play on sessions for records, for bands with, big record deals and stuff. But it was a really interesting time, and it just kind of, I was really fortunate to play with some really talented people. So me, myself, I can't really take a whole lot of credit. I was in the right place at the right time, and there happened to be a pretty good scene bubbling, both in the 80s when we had the opportunity to play, and then kind of the Husker Du, Replacement Soul Asylum, opening up for those types of bands, Jayhawks, things kind of hitting that pre-grunge thing, and then coming out with the Moon 7 Times, and kind of coming along in the college scene at the same time as Hum. So it was really, I had probably a couple of near misses on getting famous there. So. Yeah, we were going to be the next Seattle, or whatever, the next Austin. So, it was a really interesting time. You had guys like Jeff Merritt with Parasol Records, who was, he had the subsidiaries where he was putting out local rock bands. The college rock station, we happened to slip a couple of bands on there. My band got played. Actually, my band got played on the local college station because we were getting played in Boston. It wasn't because we were from here. It was because we were on playlists elsewhere. So it was just a good time, and there was a good dynamic. And we came up through the mindset of, don't try to be the biggest band in your hometown. It was sort of coming out of, and don't get me wrong, these guys were really talented, had a lot of fun. There was a lot of great bands, but sort of the hair bands of the 80s, the big goal was to be the Friday night, Saturday night band at the big rock club here in town. That was, that was kind of your pinnacle, whereas we were of the mind of, go be a crummy band playing in Oshkosh on a Tuesday. Get out on the road, go play somewhere, go play Minneapolis, go play someplace else. So I think we had kind of started that. The Poster Children, back when I was in a band called the Bowery Boys, we were actually signed to a little record label called Office Records, put out cassette tapes, and the head of the label he encouraged us, get on the road, go play. Don't try to be the biggest band in your hometown. Just get out, play Chicago, play Indianapolis, play Madison, play St. Louis, and so we started doing that in the Poster Children, and then Honcho Overload, which became Hum, and a lot of different things. I think there was sort of more of a mindset of get out on the road, and we made connections. The Digits came through town, and the Digits had connections in Chicago with the Chicago punk rock scene, and then the Minneapolis scene. We had a lot of ties and a lot of big support network in the Midwest. So it was pretty cool, and I think that was sort of set the stage for us to be able to do that. It raises the level of your bands and your exposure, and the guys who were starting out as the low man on the totem pole, writing about a rock band and their local zine, all of a sudden we're working at Spin Magazine or Musician or whatever else. So we kind of grew up with a lot of these guys, and as their careers got bigger, as these bands, as the bands that we were opening up for were signing to major labels, Soul Asylum and the Replacements and stuff, it was, we were kind of coming along with them because we knew a lot of the same people. So I think it was just kind of like lifted the level for everybody. Yeah, and we were just hitting that new era, and then there was a certain excitement. Cody Sokolsky came to town and opened up the independent record store, and he was a real cheerleader for the local scene, a real supporter. So when you have people like that, I mean, that's what's really going to solidify the scene. So it's not just about the bands. It was everybody. It was the people who believed in it, the people who were fans, the people who went out and really trumped it up and beat the bushes and wanted to make it as big as we could be, and was really proud of the fact that we had a great scene here. And also, I mean, there's fantastic people like Seth Fine with the Pygmalion Music Festival. He's very particular about who he brings. He has real a sensibility about who he's going to bring, but he's done very, very well with that. You have guys, Mike Ross at Cranard, who just has he's a newer to town, but just has this great appreciation for how storied this scene has been. So you'll go to Cranard, and I mean, last Saturday night, Mandy Patinkin's singing in the main hall, and 2 local rock bands are playing out in the lobby afterwards. I mean, it's just like this being sponsored by the community college's radio station, the rock stations, the non-commercial, completely college kids programming their own stuff station. So to have that, end of the spectrum, you have this like guys singing opera, and then you go out and so some of our local guys are bashing it out, and the place is packed. Lobby's packed full of kids. So it's really fascinating to have that type of the director of Cranard would say, like, this is a good idea. Let's do it this way. Let's try this and see. And he did it, and it was great.
Souls and our spirits If Champaign is nowhere, well, it's a nowhere where Alison Krauss, Dee Dee Bridgewater, REO Speedwagon, Dan Fogelberg, the group Champaign. I mean, I could just go on. If it was a nowhere place, boy, it was a good nowhere place to be. And it still is. You know, there is a sensibility sometimes, you know, it's part of the great flyover of America, you know, that goes from New York to LA. But my goodness, there's, you know, it's proven time and again that geography can play a part, but the good music's going to come from anywhere, you know.
There was always the thought in the back of my mind, and I know a lot of people's, that LA was the place to be. And I had offers to go out there and stuff, but I also knew that everybody and their brother went to LA to make it.
And sometimes there'll be a great music scene, and then all of a sudden it'll burst open nationally, like Seattle music scene. But I don't think those are in very many places, you know. Just a few places as I travel around, I see that there seems to be a lot of musicians there working and making a living, and some studios to go to and things. A place like Austin, or like I just said, Seattle or somewhere like that. But Champaign was one of those.
To be honest, in the 80s when we had a little bit of break there with us and the Digits and the Poster Children, in the 90s when it was Moon Seven Times and Hum and Hardwork and some of the other bands coming out of that. And then even more recently when there's been success, I think it's a little bit of that underdog, chip on the shoulder thing, living in the flyover states. And we're not Chicago, we're not St. Louis, we're not a big city. And I think a lot of times we're not a big city and we're not a little college town. We're not Athens. So we kind of fall in between the cracks. So it is kind of an interesting dynamic, and maybe that's what makes it so special.
Well, I think that we're really, I hope that everyone realizes how lucky we are to have such a rich culture of music in this town. Really every kind of music. We have phenomenal, we have great Irish musicians, we have great classical musicians, jazz musicians, but the rock and roll scene here has been wide and varied and long lasting. And I hope people appreciate it. For a city this size, it's really incredible how good it is. And I hope that everyone supports that by going out to see live music and buying records of these groups, because it is rare and worth supporting.